The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everybody. We're gonna just hold on here a second. We've got this thing starting up right at 10 o'clock. So welcome to our webinar. Like I said, we got about another minute to go, and we'll get this thing started off promptly. Hope everyone's having a good morning. It's freezing cold across the state, so this is a perfect example of why webinars are awesome. You don't have to travel anywhere. You can stay in your nice warm station or house and get the information without having to traverse the tundra. All right, it's 10 o'clock. Welcome, everybody, on this cold morning. We're going to be doing a webinar this morning on civilian fire deaths and firefighter line of duty deaths. My name is Sean Abbey. I'll be moderating the session this morning. I chair the Michigan Joint Fire Service Council, and I'm also a vice president with the Michigan Professional Firefighters Union. I'm a member of the Kentwood Fire Department, where I'm a battalion chief, and I've been there for 26 years. I want to start out real quick before we get into the rest of the webinar and give our condolences out to the Michigan State Firemen's Association. Dan Feifeld, their president, passed away yesterday, and our thoughts and prayers go out to all his family, friends, and fire service family as well as they move forward. We kind of got here, our first webinar went so well that we decided we're going to keep these things rolling out. We got a lot of really good feedback from all of you. And we're going to continue to do these and roll them out. This session will be recorded, but please don't let that impact your interaction. Your interaction is crucial. One thing about webinars it's difficult is you're sitting in front of a computer screen, so you might not think it's as interactive as actual class, but it can be. So don't be afraid to interact. And like I said, we'll be recorded for future use, and we'll be providing a YouTube web link for everybody in the fire service across Michigan to watch what we're talking about today. Real quick, that being said, I want to launch a quick poll. One of the things we're going to use to interact are these polls. We have a couple of them, but really quick, I just would like to see how many of you have ever participated in a webinar. You can just take a quick second to answer that, and we kind of see how many people have done one of these before. All right, we got about 80% of you in. All right, we're going to close that poll in another second, so get your vote in. All right. So there you go. Good broad spectrum there. Yes, 1 or 2 is the main winner, and kind of both sides of the ends of the spectrum. We got about 15 and 19% on either end, either none before or you do them very frequently. So, well, we're glad you're here this morning. And the webinar format. So I want to hit a couple things. You can see my screen. So a couple things are important. You can raise your hand. So on your screen, you have a little hand sticking up there. You can actually raise your hand. There's things you can answer questions, things like that are all over here in this side in your panel. There's a little arrow at the top too that I'm kind of got my thing on. You can actually hit that and that'll hide your whole panel. I want to make sure, there we go. That'll hide your whole panel. You can raise your hand right here. So there's a couple of things you can, this is to count for your microphone. You can type in questions. So like, let's say you'd like to send me a question. You could type it right here and then send it to just me. You can send one to the other people in the class, or you can send to everybody. And we can respond to those as well. I'll be monitoring those as kind of the moderator. So if you have a question for one of the panelists, you can type it into me if you don't want to talk, and I can ask them, or you can simply raise your hand and we'll call on you and get those questions answered. You also have a chat feature, so you can chat with other people in the class as well. Another nice thing on the webinar, there's this thing up here called screenshot. So you can take a screenshot if there's particular, there's gonna be slides coming up from both of our presenters today. So if there's a particular slide you'd like to see, you can just simply take a screenshot of that and you can have that and it'll save it to your desktop. There's also handouts that are down here. We have a few handouts today that both panelists they'll be talking about, and you can get those down here as well. Make sure you download those. Those are PDFs you can download right to your computer. All right. As we get going here, I'm going to do one more quick poll. Is there any questions anybody got on the webinar format itself before we get going? All right, not seeing any right now. Really quick, I get a question for everybody to get us kicked off. If there's a fatality on my fire ground, I know exactly what needs to be done. So select one of the following. You feel strongly that you know exactly what you need to do, or the other way, everything in between. Just take a quick second to answer that. Wait for a couple more to come in. Okay, a couple more seconds. All right, we almost got 90% of you in, so we'll close that. So it's interesting. About 7% of us strongly agree that we know exactly what needs to be done on our fire ground with fatality. Another 25% are agree. So basically 32% of us feel that we either know or really know what to do. And 18%, about a fifth of us, are in the probably area. And then under that, we got 29% disagree and 21% strongly disagree. So we've got some people that would like to get some information, which is why we are here today. So like I said earlier, we're glad you're here, and we're very fortunate to be joined by two guests that know their stuff when it comes to this kind of material. First, I'll introduce our Fire Marshal, Kevin Selmeyer. He's been a 31-year veteran of the Grand Rapids Fire Department. He retired as a deputy chief, and he became our state fire marshal in April of 2017, and has done a fantastic job since he's been there. So we welcome Kevin Selmeyer. And our second panelist will be Steve Heim. Steve is a vice president with the Michigan Professional Firefighters Union. He's also a lieutenant currently with the Lincoln Park Fire Department, where he's been there 22 years. He also insisted in developing the protocols and procedures for the State Firefighters Union's line of duty death response and their policy, and he'll be sharing some of that stuff with us today. So welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Sean.
Morning.
Good morning. Next, I'm going to turn this over to Kevin. And Fire Marshal Selmeyer, you're going to start with talking about what we need to do in the state if we have a civilian firefighter death.
All right, let me get my shut off my camera here for a second. So good morning, everybody. So, Sean brings up a valid point, and that's the beautiful thing about being able to do the survey, is to see how many of you know what to do if there was a death. And we weren't specific when we said a civilian death or one of our firefighters. So that's one of the things that we want to hit both sides of it today. So what I want to focus on in the beginning of it is on the fire service side of it, not on the fire service side, on actual civilian dying out of fire. And then what's the proper things that we need to do so that we capture the information for the fire reporting, so we have good statistics statewide. So that's where we're starting at. And it's kind of interesting when we look at this topic. I don't think these numbers, at least they don't surprise me. And when I say they don't surprise me, back in from like 2002 to 2008, I chaired the State Union Safety and Health Committee. And one of the things that we had during our every 2 years, we'd have a safety and health conference, is it would come up, what if you had a line of duty death in your fire department? And we did seminars. I can remember Ken Chuddy and Dan McNamara and folks doing some of those things. And it's kind of interesting. I find myself now as a state fire marshal that statistically I have to keep track of the number of fatalities within the state. And I'm talking about civilian fatalities, but also our office does track fire fatalities, and that's where we would work with the different organizations. So the next slide that I wanted to share with you is that, keeping track of civilian fire fatalities within the state actually falls within the community risk reduction plan. And I think a lot of you have seen this. It's out on our website, and I'll get to that near the end and kind of showing how you get to some of this stuff. But we put together this community risk reduction group. And one of the things when I was first appointed fire marshal on my first day, it was shared with me by my bosses that, hey, what are you going to do to reduce the number of civilian fatalities across the state? And as I jumped into it, I said, hey, it's bigger than that. What are we going to do to reduce the number of civilian injuries across the state? And then when we really started pulling out of the data, it was, hey, wait a minute, there's a lot of firefighters that are being injured at these fires. So one of the things on this community risk reduction group is we're taking a total look. And if you look at the mission statement, it says to minimize fire deaths, injuries, and property loss within Michigan. And that also includes our firefighters. We're trying to reduce that also. And then when we look to get into the vision, it's to continually decrease the fire deaths and injuries. I didn't highlight property loss because our focus today is on lowering the number of civilian deaths, but more importantly, if a civilian death occurs, we need to know about it. And then also the values, it's data driven. And one of the things that's interesting about this strategic plan, many of you back in your fire department, you have a strategic plan. I know the first one I participated in Grand Rapids, it was about 40 pages thick. And I don't know that we even accomplished half of what was in it. And simply because, well, where do you got to go dig it out? And one of the things that just prior to my retiring from the Grand Rapids Fire Department is we came up with a strategic plan and it was on one page. I joke about this, what you're seeing here. This is the strategic plan. It's kind of, when you print it out, it's on an 11 by 17 piece of paper, much like a placemat when you go into a restaurant. The idea it's right there, it's visible, take a look at it. There are measurable goals, and maybe that'll be a good topic for another webinar. We get into community risk reduction stuff, but I want to share that it's broken up into 4 outcomes, and the outcomes are in education, engineering, enforcement, and economics. And each one of those has the ability to be measured through an ops plan. So one of the reasons that I wanted to, when I reached out to Sean, I said, hey, I think this is the next one that we need to do is I wanted to see what are some things that we need to accomplish within the strategic plan. But also, as I was putting together my first yearly report to the governor's office for FY 2017, which ended in October, is I started to look at the statistics, and I'm not so sure we've captured all the civilian fire fatalities in the state. When I say we haven't captured them, is I'm not sure that all the fire reports are coming in the way that we need them to come in. So part of what we're going to talk about this morning is we're going to talk a little bit about how important fire reporting is. And one of the struggles, and it's been a struggle forever, it goes all the way back to when the fire marshal's office was the Michigan State Police, and then when you move forward out of the fire marshals, whether it's Andy Newman, whether it's Ron Farr, Rich Miller, Julie Secantine, myself, we've all struggled with how do we get the Michigan Fire Service to report. And when I say we struggle with that, it's kind of frustrating. When we look at statistically, I've got about 70% of the fire departments in the state that are reporting on a regular basis. From what I understand, the highest we've ever gotten is pretty close to 80%, which means there's still 20% that aren't reporting. I will share this. There may be some economic impacts for departments as we move forward with the changes from Senate Bill 264 to Public Act 291. It's going to be a requirement that you have to participate in MFERS in order to receive training funds. So I think that's going to have the ability to impact that. But right now, I'm more concerned with, are we collecting the information that we need? Number one, so we know about these civilian fatalities, but further, do we have an idea of where, if you want to say, identifying the high risk populations? We spend a lot of efforts, and we'll continue to spend those efforts in the schools, working with the kids in the community, doing open houses and stuff. But we need to identify what is the population, and we've got a great group that's working on this community risk reduction approach. And as we're moving forward, it's kind of interesting how some of the information's bubbling out of the data. But we're also finding that as we look at some of these fire reports, there are some fantastic fire reports, and there are some reports that flat out don't really tell us a whole lot of stuff other than this event occurred. So we need to work on that. So what are we trying to do in 2018? We're trying to identify and create a model for community risk reduction program. Community risk reduction is not just fire prevention, and I want to point that out. So as we move forward, don't be surprised that we start to see, as we try to pull out of as we get these fatalities, we run on a lot of different calls in the fire service, is to break down where they're occurring. I don't think it will be a surprise that the largest amount of civilian fatalities are occurring in residential fires, but we also are looking for trends. I was pretty amazed by how many are actually occurring in vehicles. And then further working with Michigan State Police with their investigators, finding out that, was the person, did the fire cause their death? Did the accident cause their death? Also finding out that some folks are using setting their cars on fire as a way to end their life. So as we look at some of those things, we need to pull some of those trends out. We're also looking to educate fire service leaders. This program that I'm presenting this morning, or these slides, I'm going around the state kind of doing a town hall meeting type stuff, and we're using these presentations. So if you've got a group out there, or even in your counties, if you want, I'm more than willing to come out and speak, and we're already scheduling those well into next year. And then also, how do we educate the fire service leaders? And that's really what the intent here today is that there's a takeaway that we are not in 45 minutes going to be able to cover all of what you would do if you have a civilian fatality, nor will we be able to cover if you have a firefighter fatality. What we're trying to do is to give you at least an idea of where you would start on some of this stuff, so that you would reach out to us, or reach out to the other fire service organizations and move forward with that.
Real quick, Kevin.
Yeah.
So everybody understands too. If you can go back to that last slide, I just want everybody to know that at the top I didn't mention, but you can zoom your screen. So if those slides, for example, that one that he's got on there now, if you don't have it zoomed in, you're not going to be able to read that very well. There's a thing at the top there where you can zoom your screen in to get you a better shot of that slide. So just so you guys know that.
Good. Thanks, Sean.
Yep.
So as we move on to the next slide, this is a form that's actually been around for a long time, and we've updated this form a little bit. What I found out was I was talking to a fire department right before Thanksgiving that had a fatality, and I was talking with their fire marshal and said, hey, just got to go download the form. Well, the form was in a PDF, and unless you had the right web browser, it wouldn't open that PDF. So one of the things is that we changed this form back to a Word template. It is on our webpage. I'll show you when we get to the end. I'll have a screenshot of our webpage, but it's there. If you go to the MFIRS tab, there's a page off of the Bureau of Fire Services, and some people ask, well, what's the easiest way to get there? I find the easiest way is to type in fire training MI for Michigan, hit search, it'll pop up LARA, it'll take you to the fire page, or for fire training, and then you can navigate from there. But that's kind of the way that I've found to get there quickly if you don't have it saved as a favorite. So when we're walking through that document, we need this document completed, and I'd like to have it back to us within 24 to 48 hours. What this form actually does is it lets us know that a fatality has occurred, but more importantly, some folks think, well, the Michigan State Police were investigating it. A lot of times I won't find out for, it could be, if they're investigating, it could take up to a week or more. So this is just to let the Bureau of Fire Services, let the state fire marshal know that a fatality has occurred in your community. One of the things that we're also trying to do with this is we know that, or maybe you do or don't know, but the fire reports for the month of December aren't due until January 15th of 2018. And as those fire reports trickle in from the different fire departments across the state, it takes time for all of that to get there. I really won't have good December data until probably about February 1st. So you know, I can't wait 2 months to know whether there's a fatality there. I've got the media reaching out from time to time. And there again, this is a local issue. I'm not trying to be the PIO for anybody. I just need to know that this fatality occurred. It's also going to help us as we track these. We get these forms back, we actually cross-reference them to make sure that we do receive a fire report. As I shared, if somebody dies on January 1st, the earliest I'm going to see that fire report is going to be February 15th. So, and that's if everybody uploads their information coming from each department. So I hopefully you can see why this form is so important. And one of the things, if you notice at the bottom of the form, there's mfers@michigan.gov. You can email it back to us, scan it in, take a picture with your phone, but it is important that we get that back. And that's really what we wanted to have come out of today. There's going to be some things that may not apply on the form, like it says police department, and it'll say ORI, which is their report number. If we're asking you to fill it out the best you can in the first 24 hours, giving us the date, the day of the fire, the time. Like I said, we won't get that report for a while. And then as we drop down, getting the name of the victim. And if you can get the date of birth, fine. If you can't, we'd be happy with a name. If you didn't get the name, if one of the things, just even getting the form and it has a contact person from that your department, it allows us to reach back out to you as more information becomes available. Some of the folks have shared that, well, I don't want to fill out the form yet because there hasn't been an autopsy. Well, the autopsy is going to, come after a period of time, and we understand that might be more than 24 24 to 48 hours. So one of the things, we're not too worried about that right then. But so what are we really looking for? We need to gather the fire department. We need a contact person. Ideally, we need a phone number so that we can reach back out. And cell phones really do help a lot. A lot of times on weekends and stuff, it will just go to a message at a fire department. And then also looking down, what was the cause of death? And I realize you may not be able to give the immediate cause, but at some point, usually through an autopsy, usually through an investigation, we're going to get more stuff. It's all right to update this form and send it in at that point, which also means we need to update the fire reports also. And then who completed the form, and send that form in. So Sean, I don't know if there's any questions on that. It's a pretty straightforward form. Boy, if you have any questions on it, just reach out to us. Rhonda Howard does a great job here at the Bureau of Fire Services, and she can walk you through this. But we're looking for this form in the first 24 to 48 hours. The sooner the better. No questions, Sean?
Sorry, I was muted. I'm talking to you now.
No, that's all right. All right.
Yeah, I've got a question from Jordan. He just said, this is for civilian fire deaths, line of duty deaths, or both?
Actually, if there's a line of duty death, even sending us that form, it is important. There's some things that, number one, I need to let the governor's office know if there is a line of duty death, but also we want to make sure that we work with the different organizations to make sure that we start getting the PSOB stuff going. And Steve, I don't want to steal anything from your program, so I would say any fatal fire, civilian or firefighter, we need to get one of these forms within the first 24 to 48 hours.
Okay, terrific. So both of those. And I had one question also, if you can reiterate exactly where this form was at again.
It's on our webpage, and I'll if you go to our landing page, you go to MFIRS, it says fatal fire report. It's just a matter of clicking on that.
And you said you're going to show us that at the end anyways, right? You said
I will. Yep.
Okay, perfect. Yep, those are the questions I have.
Okay. All right, I'm going to keep moving. So one of the things that, as we started to look at, I've got fire reports. I've received a fire report, and I know there was a fatality at that fire, and this has taken a little bit of investigation. But then I find out that the casualty form wasn't done, and that's what MFIRS calls it. They call it the casualty form. So when you are doing the basic MFIRS form, and you go in and you mark that there was a civilian fatality or there was a firefighter fatality, one of the things it's then going to take you to this page, and a lot of the departments out there are using a third-party software to collect their information. And it doesn't really matter whose you're using, but what we're really looking for is when it gets uploaded that it gets to us. So, basic stuff on the top of the form, I've kind of got it broken down. Ideally we're trying to capture a name, male, female, age or date of birth. We're looking to, and you'd be surprised on a lot of these fatalities, it's showing a fatality on the fire report, but a lot of this stuff isn't there. And I would hope at some point that there's some type of investigation that you need to go back and you need to update these. And I know when I was in Grand Rapids, and when I was the last couple of years, I was a deputy chief, the fire marshal's office, fire prevention was under my direct report with the fire marshal. And one of the things that we want to make sure is that these fire reports, that you go back and you complete them after you gain the information that you'll get through the investigation process. So some of these processes go on for quite a while. We understand that, but at some point we're also asking the fire service to go out and to catch up on those. So pretty basic across the top. You need to pick one, date and time of the injury. I would use the incident. It's going to give us an idea, that, hey, we responded at this time. But if you know that, hey, it was an hour into, if it was a firefighter fatality, and let's say maybe there was a secondary collapse, then we would want to capture that. Time would definitely be different. There'll most likely be timestamps that will be picked up through CAD and such. So it's a matter of reaching out to your dispatch and gathering that information. And, our goal also is, through training and education, is that we'll never have to use these forms either, right? So, but, there is some things that we want to make sure, especially when we get into the line of duty death and such, for firefighters, that we are capturing information. So as we move down, this is probably the biggest part here, that when I looked at fire reports, and yes, we are looking at them, and I'm not looking at them to be really critical about, is that a good narrative or not a good narrative? But a lot of these checkoff boxes we can run queries in the process, we can gather information. This is going to be important for the community risk reduction stuff. So, you know, when you talk about the cause of injury, we're just asking you pick the one that best fits. I mean, if somebody jumped out a window at a fire, you know, you have that option, jump to an escape attempt. You pick which one fits best. I know on the human factors, a lot of people go, well, how will I know that they're asleep? How will I know if they're unconscious? Well, if you're pulling somebody out of the building and they're not conscious, that's, I think, pretty straightforward. You can check that box. I know some of you would say, well, I'm not comfortable with the alcohol or the drugs or the disabilities and the other stuff. You know, a lot of things we'd be looking at was, you know, was the person unconscious when they were pulled out? A lot of times this gets left or they mark none. It needs to be one or the other. Either they were asleep or they were unconscious. There again, the better information that you can give us. And then K is the one where you get 3 contributing factors. And you're going to have a lot of drop downs in these. One of them, I'll give you the main headings, and I think that's important. Egress problems. So were their doors locked? Was there problems with security bars? Was the window size? Maybe people couldn't get out because of the size of window. That's what we're talking about when we say egress. Stuff that obstructs openings. Fire patterns. Did the fire itself cut off their ability to be able to get out of the fire? Were they above the fire? Were they below the fire? Did it so was the vision blocked or impaired by smoke? I think that's pretty self-explanatory. At a minimum, we're going to mark that one. You can mark up to 3. And then escape. You know, did they re-enter the building? Was their clothing on fire? Were they unfamiliar with the exits? Different things like that. I think when you get into some of the commercial occupancies, hotels, motels, you know, are people necessarily familiar with how they get out? Was there a collapse that occurred as part of this? And then it gets into vehicle related, it gets into equipment, and then it gets into other special factors. So there's a lot of choices there. They're in the drop downs, but please try to paint a picture for us. Give us some ideas so that when we're looking at trends to do community risk reduction, we'll have better data to work with. Activity when they were injured, you know, as we go through, location at the time. One of the things, and I was looking back at a fire that occurred in early 2017. I know about the fire because I got friends that were at the fire and we talked about the fire afterwards. But then, so I pulled that report just to look at it. The narrative in that report is amazing. They did a great job on the narrative. I mean, I literally can tell you who was doing what, where. That was documented by the battalion chief and then all the company officers. But a lot of the stuff that's in this area right here that's on the screen, there are a lot of empty boxes. So, you know, one of the things that we'd like to know at the time of incident, were they near the origin of fire? Were they away from it? It even gets into what floor were they on? What story was at the start of the incident? So when you arrived, where was the fire at? Where was it in relationship to where the folks were that were injured or became fatalities? And then also the last part of it, as we move down through it, is the symptoms. You know, were they burned? Were they not burned? I think it's important that we're documenting if they don't have any burns on them, but they were unconscious, that we can look at smoke only or asphyxia. So different things that we want to look at. And then what parts of the body were injured. It could be on somebody that was his smoke inhalation. You know, it's more of the extremities and stuff. You know, you may not be able to mark that box, and we get that. But then the disposition, where were they transported to? And any information that you can put in there will be helpful. So this is an area that, as I looked at those reports, like I said, I'll going back to my own department, they did a great job at the fire. They did a nice job of knocking it down. They actually got this gentleman out very quickly. You know, the fires have changed, and we start looking at the UL and the NIST stuff and the smoke and the hydrogen cyanide and a lot of the other stuff that goes with it. So we know that there's a lot going on here that is impacting whether people can get out or not. And the more information that you can give us, the better. That's probably our biggest thing, is that we want to talk about how important the narrative is. I've had the opposite. I had a report that the whole report was filled out very well, but it was very vague on the narratives. One of the things that we strive for in Grand Rapids, that we put a lot of effort into the report writing side of it, was kind of paint us a picture. What did you do at the fire? And that's important that gets added in to the whole report, to read the different perspectives of what people did, what tasks they were assigned, how they carried it out. Did you run into any obstructions? Were there things that kept you from getting stuff done? Did it go, was the door unlocked? Different things like that. And a lot of times you say, well, that's more for the investigator to figure out. Well, that's going to help us with the community risk reduction stuff. So we just want to give you an overview. MFERS is important. We need to make sure that it's done in a timely basis, that it gets uploaded to the state by the 15th of the following month. And then further, as things change, as you learn more about that event, please update your fire reports. If you have any questions, Rhonda Howard, and I'll have a couple slides down, her email. Rhonda is here every day. She does a great job for us. Reach out to her. She definitely can work with you as you work through documenting these incidents of a civilian fatality. And then one of the things that
I sent you
Sean,
I'm sorry, I sent you a quick chat question if you can look at that real quick. But in the meantime, I like what you said too about the reporting, as far as the timestamps and using dispatch. We really have to get out of the mindset of, we want to keep things private, or we don't want to say stuff over the radio or stuff. A lot of the new reporting stuff and a lot of the things that can really help us down the road is if we are, advising dispatch of, we found a victim. We pulled the victim out. ALS is with the victim. Those type of things. Because when we rebuild that scene down the road, it's really nice having those things time stamped, so we can kind of get a good picture of how that all went down. And I think we really shouldn't be afraid of that stuff, because I think that's more helpful than hurtful in the long run. I don't know if you agree with that.
No, I agree 100%. And, there was a fire that occurred in May over in Kent County, one of the suburbs. And what's interesting is the person who called in the fire was talking with dispatch, and then dispatch said, get out of the house. Well, the path they chose was to go from the upstairs, down the stairs, and out towards an egress, which we would expect. The fire department actually arrives very quickly. It's not a very big fire. They actually grab the person real fast, get the person out, but they die of hydrogen cyanide. So one of the things that we want to look at is that even how we educate people on, I've got dispatchers that want to get involved in community risk reduction with the idea that maybe telling people to get out of the house, maybe we should tell them, close your door, reduce the flow path, and go to a window and wait for the fire department to rescue you. Because in this case, there's not a mark on this person other than because of the toxic parts of the plastics that are breaking down, the smoke has changed. So we're going to have to look at that as we move forward. But yes, the more information that you can give us, we have a group that's dedicated as part of this community risk reduction. They're studying these fire reports. We're trying to pick up on trends. So we're trying to make a difference. Sean, the next slide that I brought up that's on here, I put on here the National Fallen Firefighter Foundation, which annually, has the big ceremony in October in Emmitsburg at the memorial. But also, I want to let everybody know about the Fire Hero Learning Network. I also want to challenge folks. They keep track of who signs up from what state. All you need is an email, and you create a password, you create your own account. There's a bunch of online classes that are somewhere between a half an hour to an hour long. The one at the bottom of the slide, I have Curbside Manner. It's a very good program that was put together. Sometimes when you're talking to families and stuff after a fatality or after a civilian injury, it's hard to have that conversation. And I don't know that we always get training on how to do that. So there's a nice little program on there. There's a certificate at the end if you want it, but you can go in there and it talks about how do you talk with people when they're having their worst day. And I thought that was appropriate with this topic, that when you have a fatality in your community, it's uncomfortable for everybody that's there. It's not a normal day by any means, and then how do you move through that? So that's one of the things why I included that. So I also want to put out the challenge. They keep track by states, and Ohio is kicking our butt. They have way more people signed up for Fire Hero Learning Network. I would love nothing more than, as being very involved with the National Fallen Firefighter Foundation, to pass Ohio, pass Wisconsin, who even has more than Ohio. Kind of a Big Ten thing here, right? So let's get people signed up for Fire Hero Learning Network and take advantage of the education that's out there. And then one of the last things, Sean, that I wanted to plug before we make the switch to Steve, and this is a screenshot of our website. Notice silver and red, it says the official way that the Bureau of Fire Service would communicate with the fire service. If you're not signed up for Gov Delivery, please do. It's just a matter of going to the webpage, click on that, enter your email. There's classes that are on there. If you're coming back to it, it says click here to view announcements. There's all kinds of training that's out there. And then over to the left real quickly, the fire marshals tab, the community risk reduction is on my page. So if you go there, also the it talks about the civilian fire fatalities on there. But if you go all the way down to the bottom, so on the blue ribbon on the right, go to where it's gray, it says MFERS. All of the stuff that explains the MFERS stuff, Rhonda Howard's contact information, all that stuff is right there. So we're trying to make it as easy as we can, but we want people to realize that there are a lot of resources that are out there to help you, and that's where you would find the form to send back to us, again, within 24 to 48 hours. Hey, if you could get it to us in the first few hours, that's fantastic. But we are looking to get that within a day. And that leads to any questions before I hand it off to Steve. Sean, thanks for putting this together. We are making a difference. We are getting the word out there. Notice the second email down is Holly Metz, which is my assistant. I also have Rhonda's email down there. You know, there's that function if you want to screenshot it. But keep in touch with us, and that is my state cell phone there. So if even if you're at a scene or something and you have a question and you're not sure, you've got my cell phone, reach out. I would much rather be in the know and then work towards trying to get answers to and solutions to what you're trying to solve. So thanks for the opportunity, Sean. And Steve, if you're ready to go, I'm going to make the switch.
I had one quick question for you. They kind of tie in together, but can you show where we get that fatality form? And then it is in Word, you said, right, as well? It used to be.
It is a Word document. Yeah, we switched it from a PDF to Word.
Okay. And they just like the web address or how to get to that, if you could just show real quick.
It's if you go in, and the easiest way that I've found to get to our webpage is type in fire training and MI, and it'll take you to the right to the yeah, I got to back out of here so I can get to,
okay.
I got a lot of things on my screen here, Sean.
You're a busy guy.
Yeah, I know that.
All right, we're finishing up with this section before we start into line of duty death. So if you have any questions, you can raise your hand, type in a quick question while the fire marshal's locking down where to get to the.
So if you go to your browser, and like I said, I just always go up here and I just put in fire training Michigan. You see it comes up. It's one of my, and that takes us right to the Lara Fire Division here. Is the way I find the easiest way. Now we're live and we're on the web page. I think it's going to let me scroll down here. I hope it does. So there's a bunch of stuff in there on the course catalogs and different things. Okay. If you go to the MFERS tab, which is over here on, and you click on that, and you scroll down, it talks about MFERS, and then it talks about fatal fire fatality report form right here. Okay, so you click on that, and then that opens up the form. So
and I've got one question. I have one person with a hand up too, Matt. When you get a second too. You ready for that?
Yeah, go ahead. Why don't you? It's loading here, I think. Okay. So go ahead and what's the question?
Matt, you there? Hello? Matt, are you there? Oh, he just typed it in. Hold on a second here. If we have a fatality, a line of duty death or civilian, do we need to have the fire investigated by who? How would we contact the correct person to have it investigated?
That's a local thing that your department should have. Really should have a policy or procedure that talks about what you're going to do when there's a fatality. For some departments, they have their own investigators. Some counties have investigators where they work together. But the other source is the Michigan State Police. And by calling the Michigan State Police Operations Center, they will dispatch the appropriate state police investigator out. And I'm working with them. We've actually developed a pretty good relationship in the last few months, and they're doing a great job of, at the end of the month, they're actually sending me over kind of an overview of what they've done for the month and where it was at and the causes. And that's where we want to match it back up with the forms. So that's a department thing that, you know, is left at the local level for them to decide, but the Michigan State Police is definitely an option.
Terrific. And then I'll let you start sending your screen over to Steve and let him be the presenter. But I have one last question while you're doing that. And I'm assuming that this form is something that you could have downloaded right at your department, right? So you could put it right in your.
Yes. Yeah, you should be able to. All right, Sean, what am I hitting on here to change presenter? There we go.
All right. I hope that answered everybody's questions. If you have anything else, you can send emails or get in touch with us later. But we're going to keep going here into the line of duty death section with Steve Heim. So thank you, Fire Marshal Selmeyer, and keep moving on.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Sean. So you got my my screen up here, hopefully.
Yeah. You want to just go to present mode instead of slideshow. There you go.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. Hopefully, you can hear me okay on my mic here. I think the last question actually helped segue into my component of this presentation pretty well. I think that what we're going to see right away is that in the state of Michigan, there's not a consistent way to handle the actual line of duty deaths on the fire side or on a civilian side. And it's going to make things a little bit complicated as far as trying to figure out what exactly we need to do and how we're going to operate inside of this space. For my presentation, mine's going to be a little bit different than the fire marshals. Instead of it being in an official capacity, I'm going to talk about really working as a support function of a department. So the presentation we're doing and the one I've been set up with now is that this was my role as a union firefighter in the state of Michigan, trying to support locals inside of our jurisdiction, and then how that worked and some of the lessons learned from that piece. So on mine, just for some background with how this thing really launched for us, for me personally, and then for us an organization. In the spring of 2013, we had a fire fatality in Michigan. It was inside of one of the locals that was within my district. I put here on the background screen kind of my experience with this, although I had some training and background in line of duty death investigations and some of the training that went along with that. I hadn't actually participated and was not involved with one. And in that spring, I was off duty. I was at home with my kids, who were 2, 5, and 7 at the time, so they were little. I was home. My wife was working. I simply started with a phone call, recognized the name on the phone. It looked like a union thing. I let it go to voicemail, and I was waiting for more appropriate time to answer and be able to get some background. Waited 15 minutes, answer the phone, or go back to the voicemail, listen to the voicemail. And it's literally one of the vice presidents of one of our locals, in a very calm voice, just says, "Hey, don't know if you've heard yet and you got any calls. We've got an extensive fire with a roof collapse. We got a firefighter missing. It's been a long time. We're not sure what's happening. Call us when you get a chance." And that went from just a normal day in the house to a switch over to now try to figure out what exactly that meant, what that entailed, and then I tried to follow through and get answers to some of the questions that immediately popped in my head, and then worked our way back through that. The reason I brought that up is because I think a lot of these things, even though you've got some background or some practice with it in the training side, the realistic point of this will be that it's going to be at a time it's not expected. You're not necessarily going to be prepared for it or have the wherewithal to try to work through it immediately. You're going to have to try to systematically review and see what's happening with this. So as I work through my slides and we go through my presentation, I want you guys to continually think through how your department would react, the type of background that you have, the planning and preparation you've put into it, and to really challenge on how you're going to move forward with this. I don't have all the answers. We certainly don't have enough time to cover everything that a line of duty death would entail, but I'm trying to bring up points so that you'll be able to think through some of the background of that, and then start preparing yourself and getting the answers as you move forward. So this was a call that profoundly changed my understanding of the line of duty death process and what it meant. It changed my way that I would realize how it would impact a department. the challenges that the incident presented and the passion and commitment that the members had for one another and their family. I was an outsider, and it was a great impact on me, so that I can't even start to represent what it actually meant to the department. But it was a real challenge, and it's something that's going to be really difficult for all of us as we try to work through that. Obviously, in Michigan, there's a significant risk with the current environment we're in that there's a potential we could have a member catastrophically injured or killed in the line of duty. I just broke down a couple of the things that we're battling with all the time. We've got staffing declines, which could impact us not only on the scene and it actually lead to some of these fatalities, but also it's going to impact how the line of duty death investigation is handled, how the run responses are maintained and continued as the event unfolds, and then how we're going to work through this and getting prepared, doing the fire investigation, through the funeral, through everything else. The staffing is going to have a major impact. We're all struggling with membership retention. The experience level is going to be a little bit lower than in the past, and these are going to all add to making the way you handle the line of duty death a little bit more significant. The training's difficult. These are things that happen very infrequently. There's a lot of material to try to cover, and the ability for each of us to try to maintain a current, up-to-date understanding of what we need to do and how we do it is going to be extremely difficult just because of the infrequency of the events. But that's going to pose a significant risk for how we handle the situation and our ability to work through it. Move my screen around here. Apologies. And then of course we got the threat with the changing of building materials and the types of fire events we're having and what that'll pose to the line of duty deaths. What I'm going to try to do is talk about the preparedness and the ability for us to work through these line of duty death incidents. And I think what you're going to see over and over again as I try to use some of the lessons learned from the events that we participated in, the idea that if you can get prepared before the event is going to have a massive change in the outcome and the ability for you to do this successfully and to try to make sure that we work within the family's needs and the needs of the department. So one of the things you're going to see throughout my presentation here is that we need to start developing guidelines, policies, and procedures to try to make the event, to minimize the amount of exposure you'll have on the event and to be able to divide up the workload that comes along with that. You're going to see right away on any of these events that the amount of workload that goes into it and the amount of things that need to be completed are almost impossible for you to be able to manage internally, regardless of the size of your department. It's going to require a lot of resources from the outside and a lot of help. And it's also going to require outsiders to be able to work through what is going to be an emotionally challenging time. And an outsider or a support function of another group is going to be able to provide you with some of them. The stability to be able to work through some of the decisions that are coming up in this highly stressful, highly critical situation. So having a well-developed standard operating guideline is going to help you try to minimize the event from the emergency operation itself, through the patient transport, through the fire investigation, through the funeral home, through the coroner's office, and through all those steps. So one of the things that we really need to do, and we tried to focus on the state side of it, was trying to set up a policy or procedure that takes you from the start of the incident all the way through the entire event, through moving and transporting the firefighter, whether that's to the hospital, to the funeral home, to the coroner, wherever, through the funeral, and then through the behavioral health side on the back end of what this event will cause. And so when we're creating the policies, it's going to be extremely important, like I said, to start from the very beginning of the incident, notifications, scene relief, all that type of stuff, all the way up through the cemetery, and then the follow-up health and behavioral component of the family, the department, individual members, and all those that participate in the event. In doing that, you're going to realize right away that we need to make partnerships with other agencies. Kevin had mentioned and we talked about if there was an investigation, who would you call? You're going to have to work within your local jurisdiction's control, and then also what will we do if we've been maxed out? There's a chance the fatality could be the only fire marshal you have on the department. So what would you do if that happened, and how would you have a plan B? And that type of stuff would require partnerships. It's going to require work with other agencies and getting the phone numbers and stuff before the event. So that's going to be a key component. During the event that I participated in, after that phone call that I received, within about an hour, I transitioned over and actually went to the scene of that event. and this building collapsed. We had a firefighter that was missing. That was ultimately buried by the structural collapse, and so we were actually on scene and started to help them through the supportive function while the fire was still occurring and was still trying to be controlled. And we were trying to figure out how to work through getting the information that we needed to the scene, and then be able to work through that information. So not only did we need phone numbers and contact stuff on scene, but we also needed to be able to start working through some of the paperwork and some of the other things that we needed to start doing in order to make this work. And like I said, it's just an overwhelming event. You're going to have to reach out and get other people to work with you. On this particular scene, we had my OSHA, the Wayne County Medical Examiner, state police, local fire, just on scene trying to work through that group. And the ability to know people ahead of time and understand how you're going to communicate with each other, how you're going to share this information is going to be really important. I have labor management relationships. Obviously, I'm coming from the union side of things, but most fire departments have associations or social groups or other employee benevolent societies and other things that are going to help help you work through these events, and you need to make relationships with them and try to work through that. The mutual aid groups, that's kind of self-evident. We're going to need help from the scene through all the different backfill and all those other groups. So having relationships built there is going to be a tremendous benefit. Professional associations, you're going to see that everything from the International Association of Arson Investigators through the National Fallen Firefighters groups and all those different things, they're all going to be able to provide information and get you the help that you need as you work through the event. Now, one of the things that, like I talked about in the very beginning, was that we need a systematic approach to be able to handle the line of duty death incident from the time of call through the entire event till it finishes, whether that's a cemetery or a hospital or whatever we're going to do. But we need a way to divide up the work and find some manageable approach. Got everybody get my recovery agent here. Okay, sorry about that. But we're going to need a systematic approach. Obviously, I put in here that they're complex and they're difficult. There's going to be a lot of stress there, and we need to be able to work through this and divide this thing up into a reasonable workload. What we walked away with after our event and some of the stuff that we had associated with it was we realized right away that the ability for someone to memorize or be able to work through all the material that's necessary in order to handle one of these line of duty death events was going to be near impossible. And what ended up happening on the scene we were inside of a battalion chief's car on the laptop trying to figure out how we were going to handle moving the firefighter, what we needed to do with the gear, documentation, all the things that would be associated with that. And what we found ourselves doing was trying to scan through manuals that were the IFF's fire scene investigation manual is about 190 pages. So for us to be able to work through and try to find the individual questions and get answers to the questions that we were raising was extremely difficult, and it took a lot of extra energy. So after we come out of that event, we realized right away that one of the things that we needed to do was divide up the workload and the background information into more manageable tasks. So when we did that, the MPFFU created a line of duty death task force. It was set up through our executive board, so our district vice presidents, which are spread throughout the state, were given access to this task force, and we developed incident-specific responses to different types of incidents, and then we developed specific packets to go along with each type of response. And like I said, this is the way we handled it as the MPFFU, but it's easily expandable or used by other departments regardless of your affiliation or the makeup of your department. So we're just using it as an example, but I kind of want to walk through with you how we had it set up. So on ours, what would happen is if we had a request for help again, like we did in the case of 2013, as the phone call comes in and we receive it, we would obviously get some information about what was happening at the event, and then we would try to define what type of need they had and what type of support that they needed in that particular case. And what we did is we broke ours into different types of events. So line of duty death could be where you're participating or helping from the scene, like I had experienced in 2013. It could be that you were notified or called in after the event, and we're working well after the incident is over. So we developed a packet and a set of responses for what you would do if the firefighter has been removed from the scene or into the hospital. We developed a packet for what would happen if there was a catastrophic injury. So obviously in an injury, you don't need the funeral side of it and all these other pieces that we had built in there. So we did a catastrophic injury piece. We did another packet where if it was just involvement in an investigation of the incident. And then we did another packet for how to handle funerals and how that entire process would work. The packets themselves were literally a set of checklists for each incident type and each specific need that we developed for each of those types of incidents. And they're checklists that get divvied up and handed out into different job assignments, similar to how we would handle an incident command system where we'd have an operations, logistics, planning, and all of those things that the fire side were kind of used to. We did the same thing for the packets. We divided the work up into some reasonable workspace. So the screen that I have here is just demonstrates what the incident on-scene checklist would be for one of our packets. So in this particular case, it came in as a firefighter was still on scene. We still had someone missing, or they were still on the scene for some reason, and we could begin to go through these checklists. We made our checklist where they're available anywhere that you have internet, or in the case of some of us, we've got them actually loaded onto our phones or our laptops so that we can get access to this. You need to be able to have it portable and easily accessible. You know, the one we were dealing with, we actually had a 3-ring binder that we were talking about going to get that had been on a shelf for 6 years or so. So the ability to have it portable and easily accessible on scene was going to be extremely important. So we've added these packets to our, we use Dropbox, but we've got an online function that we're able to use from our devices. But in this case, we have an on-scene incident. We'd be able to pull up the packet, and then we can email it to the scene, or we can email it to one of our vice presidents that was on scene, and then they can start divvying out these tasks, and they can be printed out, they can be done on PDF, and they're going to break down the work, like I said, into all these different checklists. So there's some examples. So we've got the incident scene checklist. It would go through radio communication, securing the scene, holding gear, establishing a PIO, and all these different things that you would have with the incident scene checklist. I'll show you an example of that here in a minute. We've actually got a checklist for the incident commander that's a little bit of an operations side that talks about how you're going to divvy the tasks on the emergency operations component of the event. We've got stuff for the fire department's chief and what responsibilities they have. We've broken down the hospital liaison and the hospital checklist that they're going to use if the firefighter was injured or killed and then ended up in the hospital. And there's a whole breakdown of all the different components that you would need to evaluate. We have a notification of survivors form that talks about who's going to do the notification, when they're going to do it, how they're going to do it, the supportive side of that, and how we're going to work through it. And these checklists are developed so that we don't skip anything, so that in the haste of the event, we're not missing any of the pieces. So there's an awful lot of things that you're going to fill out, a lot of check boxes. There's some notes in there where you're denoting who you talk to, when you talk to them, and some of the timeline to that. We've got a checklist for the...
Steve,
Yeah.
one of the big things too that we noticed was, I mean, this isn't like it used to be in the old day. I mean, with the technology and social media and things like that, notifications changed considerably, even over just the last 10 years. Whereas a lot of these people are getting information before we can even say anything. So it's really crucial that this stuff isn't just put off. We need to get that stuff done sooner rather than later, because nowadays it's out there. I guarantee you, if a firefighter's trapped someplace, not only obviously does that their loved ones know they're working, then they're going to find out from the news or social media if there's a firefighter trapped, and then it's just going to be a matter of whittling it down to eventually find out who that person is, and kind of we need to be on the front end of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point, and the difficult part of this entire concept of doing a line of duty death webinar in 30 minutes, the insanity to sort of even thinking that that's possible. Like I said, we're going to scratch the surface on this thing, and you'll see, I'll even use that as one of my slides. Things are not different, or they're much different than how you would expect them to be, and you need to be prepared for that. The classic 2 guys in dress blues showing up at the door of a wife who's at home is what we envision for a family notification. Hardly any spouses are at home. They may be at work. They may know that there's a fire because of Facebook. So you're going to have to transition and think through how this fits real world. And that was one of the struggles we had when we were working through our event, was that it sounded good and easy, but when you got into it, there was a million little questions that were a little bit more of a challenge. And these checklists are just designed to help you think that through. And we didn't invent it. We took a lot of ours from West Bloomfield Fire Department, had some. There's a lot of examples out there on the web that were highly usable and that we did plagiarize and steal from. So we certainly don't have any ownership to this, other than that we just shared the concept and tried to make it specific to our group. But these things are out there. We'd certainly share anything that we have to any group, any firefighter in the state. We can get these forms to you and you get a chance to look at them. But you're really going to have to spend a little bit of time doing this and work with people that have had experience with it before, and use that experience to help work through your incident. So make sure that you're reaching out is another really big important part of this. The other thing that's there too is I mentioned some of the manuals that you would have to go through. And we try to include the manuals into our packets. So if we have an on-scene incident like the one I'm showing you, we actually have some support material that's embedded right into the file, so that when we send it out to you or the person's going to pull it up on scene, they have these available to them. We included to here that I just show you as an example. So if, the U.S. Fire Administration has a firefighter autopsy protocol. There's a ton of questions about, do you draw blood gases? Do you do all these different things with the firefighter once they've passed away, and how you're going to handle that? You can take this firefighter autopsy protocol and you can provide it to the coroner or the funeral home or whoever's going to be doing this autopsy based on your jurisdiction. And we've got that there. Something as easy as having this on even just an iPad in a PDF. The iPads and their iBooks function, or the PDF function, has a search component to that. So you can literally search for what you're trying to find and pull it up out of the material. It's a little bit easier. IFF Line of Duty Death Manual is a little bit more about the investigation and some follow-up pieces, but it has a lot of material in there about what you do with turnout gear. What do you do with the SCBA? How do you take photos? How do you document the scene? All those are in there. And these are right into our phones, so we are able to share them with the person who needs it and let them pull through the workup material. Now, the other thing that we've done on our plan for the task force is that we've got someone who is available to go to the scene if necessary, on like I said, on our supportive side from the union. But we also have someone else that's going to stay back. Maybe Sean or someone from their home can start pulling up the materials, and from a distance start being able to pull up and answer questions for what we need without being attached to the scene, without following through that incident. And that's going to be a real big plus to being able to get this done. This is just a few more of the responsibilities on that same checklist. And this thing even goes through, and we even did funeral stuff, honor guard responsibilities, who's going to do the PIO stuff through survivor benefits. And it just keeps on and on as you start working through how this thing would go. Like I said, from the scene through the funeral to the cemetery to behavioral health, there's going to be a lot of components to this, and we need to make sure they're identified. We tried to do that with our checklists, and it has some pieces. I'll show you one in a minute that's kind of got the actual breakdown of the lists. But what I want everyone to kind of understand is when we're going through this presentation and you're working through your policy, you need to understand that we're just kind of scratching the surface of what the needs are going to be. And part of getting this done is going to be able to find a couple people that can help assist with the process and be able to help sort through and work through all the things that are being offered to you, all the questions that have to be answered, all the decisions that have to be made. I think it works well to have almost like a joint command where we've got a department person, an employee group. We've got 2 or 3 people who are going to do the best that they can to try to work through the scenario and do what's in the best interest of the firefighter's family. I think if everything comes back to that idea that what's the best interest for their family and how you can work through that, this team can be built and work through and get this thing done right. But as you're going through this, some of the easy stuff that becomes difficult, I kind of listed here on some of the thoughts, even something as simple as personal effects. Who's going to go to the locker? Who's going to clean the locker? Who's going to provide stuff to the family? Do we need to sort through things? Is there things in there that we don't want the world to know? There's a lot of those things that are there. Then you get into the funeral. What type of service do they want? What kind of religious background do they want? Do they want to be, in a casket? Do they want to be cremated? There's all these pieces in that stuff. that are difficult to do.
And
Who
Steve,
notifies the family?
And Steve, I'm not sure because you've got your program laid out here, but I mean, a lot of that's helpful with those forms that we've got down below in those handouts.
Yeah, and I'm actually setting up for that, the way that
Okay.
this is put together. So, so when you're going through these, a lot of these are personal questions that there's no way in the world you're going to be able to figure out without asking the person before it happened. So what Sean's bringing up is we've included in some of the documents some forms that you could fill out ahead of time. And that's probably one of the best things you could even do is coming out of this presentation is in order to be prepared and sort of eliminate some of the real tough questions, some of the things that are going to be hard to decide, would be that you go through the forms that we provided, and it's really just a personal form that each member of the department can fill out on their own that talks about it, asks a lot of these questions. We've got a financial piece, we've got a funeral stuff, what type of arrangements do you want, what religion do you want, you know, who notifies the family, who do you want from the department to sit with the family, who do you want, you know, and you've got some, what you're hoping are guidelines to help the members that are still alive that are trying to work through this. You're going to leave your wishes with them and let them try to sort through and figure this out in a way that you want. So we've included those forms. The best thing for the department to do is include that in their policy and procedures, is to have a form available for you to be able to fill out, and then have a training process to that so that you can train and do this in a way that that makes sense. You need to make sure that you've got a way to, like I put on this slide here, we need a way to make sure that we're maintaining privacy. We need the members to trust in the process. And we need them to be able to fill this thing out, which is personal details, and they have to know that the details will not be shared unless it's the right moment with the right time for their family to do it. The other part of this thing we have to make sure you do is, if you're going to start these, you have to have the information be up to date and accurate. If you had a form that was filled out 6 years ago and you're going to try to interpret if it should still be used, the guy's been divorced or he has other things that are happening, but he's got a form that says specifically who to talk to, and you're not up to date, you would have to decide if you're going to break from the wishes and then go these other things. So if we're going to do it, you have to do it in a reasonable way. You have to develop reasonable expectations so that the members know exactly what this will mean, how it will work, and then have them fill out the forms. But you really need to work through that as a department or organization and get this thing set up, you know, where they could actually use it and trust it.
I like you said too, Steve. I mean, that's almost something to put in your procedures and policies. Is like I mean, I know our department every January, everyone's told they need to refill out their line of duty death forms again. So it's every January. If you don't, you simply turn it back in, date it, and then re-sign it. And like our department, we seal them in an envelope with tape, and then you sign your name over the top of the seal so that you know it's not broken. But I think that's crucial that stuff needs to be up to date, because it can be, I mean, like you said, you're almost putting people in a worse spot by having old information.
Yeah, I mean, and the real challenges from dealing with, you know, working through this is you're going to have a lot of people trying to do what they believe to be the right thing. And that sometimes with the stress of the situation, that's going to be difficult to work through. And having some of this pre-identified just takes that off the table. It makes it easier. And I just can't stress enough that if you spend a little bit of upfront time to get this prepared, it's going to make, like I said, the family is going to be in a better situation, but so will your brothers and sisters that are left behind. This is always a challenge to try to work through the event and blame and all the things that go along with the tragedy. And the clearer you can have the process set up, the clearer you can identify the policies, and the clearer you can have these forms set through and trained down and done. It's just going to be a much, much easier event to work through. But the other part of this I really want to do as I walk away from the presentation, I hope anyway, is to understand that this is going to be extremely complicated. It's got an extremely high amount of details that need to be addressed in multiple jurisdictions with all different types of facets that have a lot of different components to them. Like I said, just from my scratching the surface slide, you can see them, and I tried to put some of the notes in here. How are you going to do these things? Do you have someone that knows how to handle it and knows how to work through it? Most of the time you don't. You're not going to have someone that has all these answers. You need to reach out to people that have had experience and have some background in doing it, and then divvy up those tasks. So something as easy as turn up gear. We have to keep the gear. That's in all the manuals. But what does that mean? If it's wet, how do you store it? Do you dry it first? Who does that go to? If you can't remove it, you can't cut it off. You can't. It's still part of. They're attached. They're burnt. How does that work? An SCBA, we had the high pressure line was melted through and damaged. Is the bottle dangerous? Is it under pressure? How do you move it under pressure? How do you record it? So those are there. We had questions on the investigation. We were getting, it was recommended to us that we videotape moving the firefighter and doing all those things. And the police were worried about video. They had different experiences on the criminal side with how they did that. Well, they were worried about audio and what the sounds around it would be and if that led to anything. So you'd have to work through that ahead of time. We could easily have muted it or told everyone to be quiet for 5 minutes while we did the video and then work through it. But these are things that are technical and will be critical later, but are difficult to do without a lot of additional help. I did put up the same thing as Kevin here, as far as being able to do some background research and stuff. The Fire Hero Learning Network that Kevin brought up is spectacular. There's stuff on there about notifying the family, after action reports, all these different breakdowns of what you need to do in these events. That's absolutely what that site has a lot to do with. The CFItrainer.net is an arson investigator site, but it has a line of duty death component of it, and actually has a video presentation and some reading material to go through the investigation side, and some of the documentation to that is worth reviewing. Like I said, the packets are going to be super crucial in the development of a successful plan. The other part, we don't have a ton of time to talk about, but I want people to understand that they're going to need to reach out for help, is that once the firefighter is disabled, seriously injured, or killed in the line of duty, there are benefits that they're entitled to, but a lot of them have different filing requirements and deadlines. That'll need to be worked through and talked about in your guidelines and policies. Here's a list of some of the ones that we have in Michigan. So you got the Federal Public Safety Officers Death Benefit. We make notifications through the International Association of Firefighters on our end, and they help with some of that. You can make, they give you some assistance and help through the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation. They'll be able to work you through that. Then we've got the Michigan Public Safety Officers Death Benefit in Michigan is $25,000. It's got the Department of Treasury's got a connection site you need to work through with them. You got workers' compensation forms. We've got it, so you get up to 88% of your pay, up to I guess $500 a week. We've got the workers' compensation funeral benefit. They'll give you up to $6,000 to help pay for the funeral. Those are forms that you would fill out through workers' comp. You've got all of your pension and retirement plan information that needs to be worked through. And then we've got the Michigan Police Officer and Firefighter Survival Tuition Act, which provides some schooling and educational opportunities for family. And then you've got different types of nonprofit and private organizations that have some financial stuff to assist. MAF has some these different groups that provide different benefits. You might have an AFLAC policy. You might have these others that are there to go through. In our checklist and our packets, we actually have someone assigned as a liaison for these, and you'll need to get help from the employee groups and HR and everyone else to make sure that you work through these. So I actually put on the bottom of this one, there's this firehero.org, and on the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation page, they have a Michigan Survivor Benefits piece, and it actually breaks down every one of these and tells you which address, telephone number, and the contact info. So that's there if you wanted to look it up.
And also, yeah, also Steve, the health insurance too for the 5 years, which just was passed recently. So if a firefighter dies in line of duty, you get 5 years of health care, which is nice. But I do have a hand up from Brian. Brian, I'm gonna turn your mic on if you've got a question. Go ahead, Brian.
Yes, I'm with West Bloomfield Fire, and as you said, we've pretty much got this program in place. The biggest thing I see is, just like anything we do, you need to practice. And I guess my question is there a good way to practice this program?
That's it. I don't know if you want to take it. We actually did this. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we tabletopped, and we tried a tabletop piece. But I think that what we came to with on the state level for the Michigan Professional Firefighters Union basically was that in order for all of our departments to be able to do this, it was just unrealistic. And the likelihood that you would be participating in an event was very small. So one of the things we tried to do in ours was we tried to concentrate the exposure just to to our vice presidents, which concentrates the number of people that you would be overseeing. So for my district, I've got about 1,000 firefighters that I deal with and work with on a daily basis. And so we recognizing that it was going to be difficult for 32 different departments to try to train this in practice, we thought it would be beneficial to kind of concentrate and build a core of people that got to do tabletops and some practice, and then just through their own personal experience and likelihood would be participating in multiple events. But that will be a challenge. I can tell you from my experience, one of the things that ended up being kind of a weird twist was I had a local president die of natural causes about a week before my event. And I had been working with the international and our groups about the funeral process and some of the things that were associated with his passing. And by sheer coincidence, a couple of the guys at the international who do these, the health and safety department, a guy gave me his personal cell phone number and told me if I need anything to call, and he would help me out on the weekend. Well, this fire, when we were calling for help, I just got basically switchboard operators on every call I made to every organization I was looking for help. No one was there. I was off hours, and what I ended up doing was literally calling this guy from my cell phone, and he had personal contact information for NIOSH, for for OSHA. He had everybody by name, and he sent me that number, and I literally talked to the head investigator who gave me information while he was working another fire. And I don't know how anyone can duplicate that other than just relying on groups that get a little bit more practice. But the tabletop part worked good. I think we went through and practiced it. I challenged our board to try to work through it because just like everybody else, they had interest, but they didn't get to do it as much as the guys who helped create it. So the guys who worked on this program, we had a ton of data and a ton of info, but it was difficult for everyone else to kind of do it. So we did a tabletop, let them work through it, and then I kind of challenged them to work through the forms and work through the checklists and see where the gaps were. And to be real honest, to this day, we're still trying to decide, where are we at in this and how many things do we need to fill in. And we just, with each event, we'll have more and more information to be able to rely on. But it would be just working through each other and trying to bounce it around. I know you guys in West Bloomfield have a real detailed honor guard and a great system and the trailer and all that stuff that's really helping to that. But we'll have to practice them, and that's going to be tricky.
Hey, Steve.
Yep.
1 second. I apologize. Can you just mention that trailer to the people out there so that they know about it? Because I don't know how well people know.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's another part of these webinars we're hoping to do, is be able to get people to understand that there's a lot of additional help. And I want to make sure that I get it clear. So I think I have the background pretty good. But West Bloomfield Fire Department partnered with Balfour, and they put together an honor guard trailer or a system for working through the honor guard. And they've got a lot of the on-scene management stuff for funerals and the honor guard piece of that. They've also got some practice components. I think they have a practice casket where you can actually have your honor guard practice folding and doing all the things that ceremonially you want to do on these line of duty deaths, and they have this trailer there. I don't want to speak out of turn here, but the meeting I went to, the chief was very open and honest with saying that he would share it and let people use it when they needed it, and that they would have guys available to do that. I think I'm safe to say that.
Yes.
On the webinar, but and they were talking about, for at the original few meetings we went to, they were talking about building a couple of these and have them around the state. I think, to my knowledge, right now, the West Bloomfield is the only trailer that's operational. But yeah, it's a great resource. And I don't have it with me right here, but I think that contact information would be available on West Bloomfield site. But we can make sure we get that number. But did you want to say more about it? Did I cover?
Pretty much, just if you contact the shift commander and tell them you're in need of it, then we can put the plan into play. But yeah, it's exactly like you said. Balfour donated the money for us to create it, and it's available to any department in Michigan that has a line of duty death. There is no charge for it, and it contains everything you need for an honors funeral, and we can provide people to either assist you or to train you in the different parts of the ceremonies.
Yeah, I mean, and I can tell you from my experience, the West Bloomfield guys, along with several other honor guards, were spectacular in helping us work through it. But part of this too, I'm glad you brought it up because I skipped part of my notes here. The other part of this that's really challenging and it is something that you'll have to basically adopt a liaison of who's going to manage help. And you're going to see in these events that you're going to have people volunteering to help on every aspect of this in a way that almost becomes overwhelming. The way the setup was for our situation, I almost ended up being a little bit of a traffic cop at the firehouse, just trying to find people and figuring out what they were wanted and what they were doing, and then tried to decide how much of that would filter through into the department so that they even had to deal with it. But I mean, we literally had people giving free caskets to grave markers, to they were going to give you cards for the funeral. You had people driving up and giving cash donations, all while the event's unfolding, and we didn't even have anything set up. So you're going to need a lot of help, and you're going to need someone to be able to calmly and flexibly work through all those different details. And then all the way up, and that's just the upfront part. When you get to the funeral, I learned from the honor guard guys is that honor guards come without announcing that they're coming, and you've got to deal with 4 or 5 sets of bagpipers and drums that you didn't even know were coming. And having someone designated as the head honor guard that can help manage these out-of-state pipe and drum bands that are coming in was there. And we've added that as one of our components now on the funeral side. And the other thing we've added is we have an honor guard list that's trying to keep an accurate list of who's available in Michigan and put those pieces together. So part of our task force was set up to try to manage resources and see what's available, and then make contact points for that too. But the one thing I do want to say too before I forget is that at the end of the slides, I have my phone number on there and my email address. President Doherty on our end, I don't think would in any way, not allow us to participate and help with anyone that needs help, regardless of your affiliation, full-time, part-time, being a call. It will not matter. If you need help on this, Sean, myself, anyone on our board would certainly be able to give you anything you need and help fill in blanks. And the other part of this too, for the SOGs and the policies and all that stuff, is everything needs to be family-centric, and you need to be able to let them help make decisions, and you just do what's in their interest. So if there's a split decision or something that's being tried to figure out, if you could kind of always key back in and focus on the family itself and the decisions based on that, it'll make life easier. But there's still going to be all kinds of little odd things you're going to have to work through and be able to do, and having a clear policy will do that. But
Thanks, Brian, for the help.
Hey, Sean.
Yes.
Hey, I just kind of wanted to jump in and great job, Steve, explaining that process. And I guarantee, as you shared, that President Dockery and the union would definitely help anywhere they can. There also is an asset in the state, and it's this local assistance state team, and it's coordinated through the Michigan Firemen's Association. So that group is tied back to the National Fallen Firefighter Foundation. So I think that's the big thing that we're trying to get out to everybody, that reach out to the union, reach out to the fire marshal's office, reach out to the Firemen's Association, and we're going to coordinate the efforts, and we're going to do what we need to do to honor this person, but also to make sure that their family is taken care of. And really want to thank Steve for walking through that, because we talked a lot at the end on the funeral, but on the front end, just even collecting all the information that we need to make sure that the family gets the benefits that they have coming. And that's the big role with the National Fallen Firefighter Foundation. And that's where the local assistance state team of getting this stuff documented, make sure this stuff happens in the right order, so that simultaneous while the department's trying to plan a funeral and have the funeral and all the other stuff, that the work is being done, if you want to say behind the scenes, to look out for the future of this family. So great job on sharing that, and it's definitely going to be a team effort, and it needs to be a team effort.
And the other part too that I'm glad Kevin brought up the last teams. I had that in my notes. The part you need to be aware of too is, as you're going through these sites, so if you do the National Fallen Firefighters website and you go through some of the questioning or make notice to them about the public safety officer death benefit, a lot of these groups have triggers that send and notify other people. So you'll have to watch for them. So the last team did come to our incident, and we worked with them, but you're going to, and they had excellent material, great experience, and a ton of background on that. And, we just made a partnership right from the beginning and tried to work through and help each other all the way through it. But the last piece, the only thing I also want to say is just, I think the last thing I put on here is, in order to do this right, you really got to do what's right for the family. And if you key on that, I think you'll be pretty successful in doing it. And the other part too is that, at the end of the day, if you do the best you can, no one else is going to know that it wasn't perfect, and you're just going to do what the family needs and the members need for you to be able to pull that off, and it's something that you can work through, and we'll all partner up to do it. But is there anything else, Sean, in that questions piece? I know I talked a long time.
No, I think you got everybody. All the questions have been answered. I think the big thing is you guys both hit on that. There's a lot of resources out there that are available. Just coordinate those, and I think you're a good resource too. One thing I did have a question on was the handouts. Someone was having a problem downloading those. You should be able to download. They're in a PDF on here, so you should be able to download those. So try and get those if you can. If you're having a hard time getting those handouts, you can email any one of us, and we can get those to you. But I think that wraps up. Any other questions from anybody before we wrap up the session? I know we went a little longer than we like to go on these webinars, but these are two important topics that have a lot of. We do have one question here. Let me see what this is. What's the? I'm looking for some documented clarification for state guidelines of what is considered a fire fatality and what the state differentiates between a fire fatality and line of duty death. This stems from my recent experience with a heart attack immediately post-fire. We had disagreements within our organization what this actually was. So I think what he's getting at is, fire. It's a fire line of duty death. If you have a heart attack, things like that. State Fire Marshal Selmer, you want to chime in on that?
Well, I think that's important that that they're reaching out to the different groups. By reaching out to the last team. One thing that I found in working with the National Fallen Firefighter Foundation, even if we're not sure, it's better to, if you want to say, ask. And I think I can speak for Michigan Professional Firefighters Union also, that if you find that you have a member of your department that whether the heart attack is duty related or not duty related, is you need to reach out to the organizations that can help you work through the process, so that once the determination is made, then the stuff gets routed in the right direction. And we did have that happen earlier this summer, actually in very southeastern Michigan, down near the Ohio border. Very small department had what we thought was a line of duty death, but after the autopsy was ruled that it wasn't. So we treated it as it was a line of duty death, as in all the paperwork was submitted to the governor's office. Actually, the flags were lowered to half staff in honor of this firefighter who actually worked for the corrections department. And 2 weeks ago, Saturday, the flag that actually flew over the Capitol on the day that the flag was lowered, I delivered to the family at a charity hockey game in Adrian. So my point to that is the state's going to look at it as, until autopsies are done, until all the paperwork is worked out, we're going to treat it as a line of duty death, and until it's proven otherwise. And I think that's good sound advice, that if you have somebody that was on your department and they have a either it happens right at the fire or even on the cardiovascular events afterwards, is reach out, get the process started, so that we can make sure that at least the family has the preliminary stuff started for them, and then it will work out from there.
Yeah.
Now that to chime in too, Sean, real fast on that one, is on the National Fallen Firefighters page that I was talking about, it does go through and break down some of the requirements to fit each of the benefits. So you're going to have a ton of different ones. Some of these enable you to receive some financial aid on a disability, and some of them you have to be traumatically killed. Some of them have cardiac components to them. So each act and each group has specific rules to which you qualify. So the federal one has a cardiac component that allows for the 24 hours and some other pieces of that are specific to that act. And then the Michigan one has a specific act. The tuition reimbursement has a specific set of requirements. So you have to make applications for them all, and then you may be entitled to some but not others, and you would need to have the substantiating documents for that piece. But like Kevin said, the last team's got that stuff down pat and has every one of those components broken down. And then on the union side, we have contractual obligations and other things that you need to make sure that you're meeting. But those groups all have appeals processes and ways to apply, and that should be able to give you answers of why you did or didn't qualify.
I think that stuff's all evolving too. I mean, you look at heart attack and where heart attack was, and now heart attack's there, and then cancer is kind of cancer is kind of a new thing now, and cancer's coming out as far as being identified, even in our own state. And then the next thing right around the corner is PTSD type stuff. So I mean, there's lots of things that are killing our firefighters, and it's just getting the right documentation for all of them and getting them taken care of.
I didn't get into it in ours because there's the time, but the other part of it that we have a ton of questions on and that would need to be incorporated into the department's policies is how do you handle suicides, PTSD, cancer, off duty, on duty, and you want some general guidelines about the funeral process and those identified in the policy. Like I said, that's its own 10-hour webinar, but those things need to be addressed. Again, those are complicated, and we deal with those a lot.
Cool. Can you shoot the thing back to me, presenter back to me real quick, and I'll wind this up, Steve? So we're going to wind this thing up. If you've got any further questions, all of us are available by email or anything like that we'll for sure help anybody that needs any assistance. I know there's a lot of information here today. I think the fire marshal said it early. We're not going to be able to develop policies and procedures and talk about every single instance in an hour webinar, but we are glad you're here. One last thing I want to do is I'm going to send out a quick poll of has this webinar been helpful to you and your organization? I'll launch that real quick. And also ask you if you can please fill out our survey at the end. As soon as this concludes, you'll be sent to a survey, and then you also have it emailed to you later. So if you can please complete that survey, it helps us kind of give us some good direction on these webinars where we need to go next if these are helpful, and it gives you a chance to give some input to both the fire marshal and us as far as what other things you'd like to see in the future. So we've got about 62% in, and I'm gonna close that up and show that up right now. So good. So 100%. So it's very informative. So looks like no one wasted their time on this cold day. So we're again glad you're here. And we're going to finish this thing up. I'll finish up real quick. Fire Marshal, do you have anything left before we break this thing down?
Hey, Sean, I just want to say thank you to you. I know you put a lot of work into this, and everything that I've asked. We want to do a few more, and that's one thing on the feedback too. If anybody has ideas or topics, let us know. I think we need to continue to do these. I appreciate what the Michigan Professional Firefighters Union is actually doing to help host these, and what you're doing. We are making a difference statewide, and that would probably be the closing thing. Is that the idea of these webinars is that they're available on your organization's website. They're also tagged on our website. We want people to go back and look at them, and to pick up information and continue to be informed, and realize that whether you have a civilian fatality at a fire that you go to, or you have worse yet, a firefighter that loses their life at a call that you're at, there are resources available. Reach out to us. We'll help you work through the process. And the main focus of today is we need to know. So please let us know. And everybody enjoy the new year as we move into 2018, and we look forward to bringing you more of these. And Steve, thanks for joining in today. And we definitely have a lot more stuff to talk about to inform firefighters across the state. Thank you. Thanks
very much. Appreciate it. Steve, you got anything to wrap up?
No, just reach out if you need anything. My number's on the end. Please call anytime you need it, and be safe. Have a happy new year. Thanks, Sean.
All right. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Fire Marshal. And everybody have a happy new year. Thanks for joining us, and we will talk to you soon. Be safe out there.